And welcome to Candidates Corner on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, a production of the Libertarian Party and Libertarian National Committee. Whitney Bilyeu serving as chair. As always, tonight, John Gapso on the big board, giving you the graphs, the maps, the websites, where to donate, where to volunteer, and the sort of fun information that comes along with the type of candidacies that we routinely feature on this show. As always, I'm your host, Pat Ford, and I am incredibly proud to spend time with you on Fridays and most Monday evenings, talking with candidates and affiliates from around the libertarian planet. As always, we preface our show with a couple of quick remarks. The purpose of our show is we want to give the libertarian community an opportunity to meet our wonderful down-ballot candidates. The future is now. I've had the pleasure and quite frankly, the honor of interviewing a few hundred libertarian candidates from around the nation, running for every conceivable office. I think one of my favorites of all time, I mentioned this a lot, Eric Mulder, running to be a transportation district superintendent or some such stuff. We've had town council members, water boards, education boards, state reps, state senators, and of course, on up through the federal offices. We want to challenge libertarian candidates to incorporate what we call here lunch pail issues into their dialogue, into their stump speeches, into their presentation. And take those lunch pail issues and reflect them through, if you will, a libertarian prism. We often joke that while we're very interested in Austrian economics and any one of a number of libertarian philosophies, very often candidates need to focus on what matters to the voter. And in most cases these days, well, the voter is concerned about schools, property taxes, COVID, any number of one of these issues that affect them on a day-to-day basis. By our adapting our libertarian philosophy so that it reflects on these issues, we have a greater chance of connecting with the voter, a greater chance of getting elected. And of course, then a greater chance of not governing, we don't like that word here, of stewarding communities in a very libertarian manner. Very often, our candidates are the very first libertarians that some people have ever met. And so with that comes a great responsibility, an honor and a challenge to present our statement of principles, to present our platform to the voting public. Finally, of equal importance, we seek to create a bond here. That bond is between candidates from across the nation. It's as important to someone in Rhode Island like myself to support in tonight's case, a gubernatorial candidate from Oklahoma. Whether it be Washington State to someone in Washington, D.C. Regardless, these candidates are not only our family, our friends, our coworkers, our fellow libertarians, but again, they represent that singular opportunity to deliver the libertarian philosophy nationwide and, well, now arguably worldwide. Got a couple of very special guests tonight, as always. Joining us for the first time and sort of just to say hi and listen in on the proceedings and join in for a few minutes is our newly elected national chair, Whitney Bilyeu. Joining us in just a few moments is Natalie Bruno. She is a gubernatorial candidate as a libertarian for the great state of Oklahoma. A big welcome to you both. And of course, Whitney, thanks for joining us tonight. Congratulations. It's a wonderful opportunity. There are challenges out there, but I think as you meet more of our down ballot candidates from around the nation, you'll see the incredible energy that exists out in our states and affiliates. Yeah. Talk to us about your first few weeks in office and what your priorities are. Give us just a little sense of how things are going.
Yeah, I think it's been 17 days now since it happened. So I appreciate the congratulations. I've also been getting a lot of condolences, and that sentiment is also very welcome. Yeah, so in the last 17 days, I've just been trying to get oriented, meeting with staff, figuring out where everybody is, sort of, surveying the situation and seeing where we are and where we're trying to get, and trying to minimize any potential setbacks that may have occurred with the transitioning. So just trying to keep moving forward on things and supporting the projects that we've had going for a while and that we've already invested in, and just keeping everybody on track. And we want to make sure that our donors and our members feel comfortable and confident and stable, and that's really what we want to do moving forward, and while continuing to reach the goals that we've set. I put out a letter appeal recently, that sort of established what my priorities were, which were ballot access, of course. That is the pilot light that we have to keep lit, because without the pilot light, you ain't cooking shit. So we got to have that going. And then candidate support, which I'm sure Natalie will appreciate. We get candidates on the ballot and do what we can to provide resources and training. We've got these regional trainings going on around the country right now. And then the Legal Action Fund, obviously, because once we start getting more and more candidates on the ballot, as I can attest to in Texas, you start getting sued. So we need to be building up and maintaining our Legal Action Fund as well. So those were the things that I kind of set as my focuses, sort of ongoing priorities. And then, of course, we've got other projects that we want to continue to work on and plug every once in a while, some new things in there. So always looking for opportunities to do new things for the Libertarian Party with the Libertarian Party. I love that you're doing this show for candidates. That is, as you mentioned, even though we've got a lot of challenges right now and things can get discouraging and disheartening, having the candidates out there really is something that is, in my opinion, it's energizing. It gives us something to focus on, something to get excited about. And you guys doing this, like you say, sort of bonds the candidates together and helps them see that they've got a community among each other to rely on and to build, to lean on. And then maybe the people watching will find a candidate that really moves them and inspires them to get involved, and they want to go work on a campaign or something. So this is a really cool thing. And I'm excited to be here tonight for Natalie specifically, as the former, now Region 7 representative on the LNC, and Oklahoma was one of my states. So I'm really excited to be here tonight for her. And this is a cool thing that she's doing. And I look forward to seeing all the cool stuff. I think Natalie and I met for the first time at the election night watch party, I believe, with Joe Jorgensen and Spike and in Dallas. So that was a cool thing. And I do remember that very, very well. And so I'm glad to be here with her tonight and being able to watch this.
As you look around the nation and you see the incredible diversity of both the candidates, their styles, the offices that they're running for, regardless of how any of us may feel about any of the individual controversies that are fortunately beginning to recede into the past, there's really an opportunity for everybody at every level to engage in support of these candidates everywhere, isn't there? I mean, it's regardless of where you want to invest your energies, aren't there some incredible opportunities out there right now?
Yeah, there are. And hopefully we have more. I know in Texas, we started filling up our ballot yet. So once that gets going, that candidate community is going to get even bigger, and more opportunities for people to get excited and engage with each other and support and promote, candidates, cross promotion, even, sharing each other's experiences and each other's events, and just trying to really get a groundswell of support for all of our candidates as a whole.
When people are running for office and they're doing well and they're able to, on so many occasions, as has been the course lately, able to break through and win, there's an energy there that really, it just gives us an opportunity to refocus on what's important.
Yeah.
And what is important, I think we'll all agree on everywhere, is delivering a libertarian philosophy and stewarding communities in a libertarian manner, so that we can start to, if you will, beat back this encroaching statism that seems to be everywhere. One last question, because I know you've got a lot on your plate right now, but the COVID and the all the challenges that surrounded it really they're proof positive of why we need a libertarian approach to government, don't we?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't think anybody, the thing that I have found is, since I've been involved in politics, is people always want to know what our solution is to everything. What is our solution? If it's not going to be government, what is it? And I don't claim to have all the answers, but I do know what the answer isn't. And it's basically what the government has been trying all along. And we know that doesn't work. And so just helping people see that the answer is not always government, that we need to be considering things that are not government solutions, and that sometimes they actually work. And as we get more and more of these candidates elected, we're going to see that more and more, because we're going to have these experiences of them establishing policies and, creating situations and moving away from more government-controlled things and government-driven solutions as these libertarians get in there and try this stuff. And it's successful. And I believe that once people experience it, there won't be any reason to go back. People won't want to go back. So I am very encouraged by the libertarians that are getting elected. Many people ask me all the time why I keep doing this if we don't win. We don't have anybody elected because they don't know their names. But the reality is, and the way I look at it is, if I stop, then we're not going to accomplish anything in the next 50 years. And if people before me had stopped, we wouldn't have accomplished what we've accomplished in this 50 years. So if that's how long it's taken, then that's how long it's taken. And imagine if we could focus all of our energy outwardly on the things and the issues that actually unite us and the principles that actually unite us. And instead of focusing on all of this internal strife when we do so, imagine if we could just refocus all of that, how much more we could accomplish faster and more in the next 50 years. Maybe it won't take us so damn long. So that's what I would like to see happen. And I really appreciate you, providing these opportunities for these candidates. I think it's cool because it winds up giving them, I hope, some footage and some fodder that they can go use out there as they're campaigning too. Some clips for them. And so all of this is really good. And,
you got any parting words? You got any, not just for our guest tonight, Natalie, who, you folks border each other. How cool would it be to have, an Oklahoman governor right next to the state of Texas with its dynamic libertarian operation? Any encouraging words for her and candidates who have already jumped in?
I just want to say thank you. First of all, thank you so much for doing this. I used to think that all I wanted to be when I grew up was governor of Texas. And once I got into politics, I realized absolutely not. I actually enjoy more doing the work of the party and working for candidates instead. So I really, really applaud what you're doing, Natalie. I think it's great. And I hope that it continues. I have run for office myself before, and it's not for governor, but for other things. And it's tough. And I really appreciate it. And, you've got our support here for doing it. And I hope that you have a really good team. And if you need any help from your neighbors in Texas, we're here. So keep us posted.
Excellent. Whitney Billieux, the freshly minted, as they say, right? Isn't that the term? National chair of the Libertarian Party, joining Candidates Corner tonight, not only just to encourage and egg on Natalie, but, putting it in perspective, what the opportunities that lie in front of us for, generally speaking, what we'll call the 2022 midterm elections nationally, and just how aggressive the party is going to be in doing everything they can to support them. Whitney, thanks again for joining us. And, we'd love to have you on anytime you have a few moments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Whitney.
Natalie Bruno, welcome to Candidates Corner. How are you tonight?
I'm doing good, Pat. How are you doing?
Hey, great. Listen, I love doing this. I wish I could be out in the field full time, just working on campaigns. It's retail politics is an astonishing opportunity to connect with people, really get a feel for the challenges, the problems, the opportunities. There's really no substitute for it. We all engage very often in our late night, I'll call them loosely philosophy chat rooms. Is that how we'll take the high road here? But when you get down to it, isn't it all about connecting with people?
It absolutely is. I agree with that.
Tell us about yourself. We always ask folks for what their libertarian moment was. How did you get involved in the party? I know were involved in the national campaign. That's where we met for the first time with Joe Jorgensen campaign. But give us a little story, backstory about Natalie Bruno.
Yeah, so I was a military brat. My father was in the Army for 32 years, so I ping-ponged all over the United States and even lived overseas in Germany. I always say that that's where I got my work ethic from, because I literally don't remember my dad ever having one single sick day or anything in the entire time growing up. It also made me very adaptable, and I appreciate how cultured it made me, because since I kind of moved around everywhere, it enabled me to learn about lots of different states, lots of different governments, lots of different people. I'm married to my husband. We have 6 children between the two of us. We're blended. I do a lot of work in the community. I've kind of been registered as everything. I make the running joke that I couldn't really find my place until I finally met the Libertarian Party a couple of years ago. And I jumped right in. I always like getting super involved in things. So I did, mostly on the national standpoint, because our state party wasn't quite as organized as it is now, back whenever I was looking around. So obviously I joined the national campaign. I was the marketing director for Joe and Spike. And then got super involved with my state LP. They've been doing phenomenal work here. And so we kind of powwowed together and decided that I would throw my hat in the ring for governor of Oklahoma.
Let's talk about Oklahoma. You know, it's like so many states, it's far more complicated, far more nuanced, far more diverse than anyone would think of us. Tell us about the economy of Oklahoma. You know, we all tend to think of natural gas and oil, but we know there's so much more, and it's so much more complex. What, as governor, what are you inheriting? Give us sort of a snapshot.
Yeah, so the economy has always been kind of up and down with oil and gas. Obviously, when it's good, but when it's bad, right? But we have been looking at trying to really put in different types of industry to help kind of offset that. Our criminal justice system needs a lot of work, and that's probably me being very nice. We did recently, 3 years ago this month, we did vote in medicinal cannabis. And so that has been a great help to our economy. You're talking, oh gosh, I could be completely misquoting, but I think it was close to $56 million that are brought in revenue last year. And then we also have our tribal entities here that do gaming that we bring in millions of dollars through as well. So we have kind of a varied economy going on over here. But still very focused on oil and gas. I know that part of my platform is to try to pivot that a little bit. We appreciate so much what oil and gas has done for Oklahoma, but I like to make the joke that we don't want to be the last blockbuster, right? Because we are getting away from oil and gas. There's a lot of states that are, like California, that has plans to be selling only electric vehicles by 2030, and it's going to affect those kinds of things. And so I'm really trying to motivate our state to look at other entities or other areas that we can get involved in to kind of help offset that kind of shift that's going to happen. Through things like industrial hemp and things like that are really going to help, boom our economy even more.
Excellent. We obviously, you and I have discussed an ongoing situation in Oklahoma that was brought to my attention, ironically, from a criminal justice activist who I hope to have you on another style of show with in the near future, from Connecticut. Because Oklahoma is generically referred to as one of those Midwestern sort of, it exists in sort of, I wouldn't say the news isolation, but it doesn't get the sort of coverage, obviously, that in New York, or California, Florida, or Texas gets. So to a certain degree, it can escape unless there's intense focus because of a singular dramatic event. It can escape a lot of the coverage and analysis that happens in some of these bigger, flashier states, if you will. And by the way, I live in Rhode Island, and Rhode Island suffers from the same issue. Incredible things happen here. And, it's tiny little Rhode Island. Who would know? There's an ongoing case that I think is a reflective, if you will, of criminal justice challenges in Oklahoma. And I'm using that term kindly. It's the case of Julius Jones. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that. There's an organization called justiceforjuliusjones.com. I would commend all libertarians to take a moment and look at that, because in a lot of respects, Julius Jones is the poster child for what's wrong with jurisprudence here. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so high level, essentially what happened was Julius Jones, he was convicted when he was 19 years old for committing a crime that he did not commit. He was charged for murder of a gentleman in his driveway. There's actually a documentary on 2020 that I highly suggest that anybody who is interested in the case to watch, because there's so many moving parts in this case that I'm not going to do it any justice by doing just this high level. But essentially what happened is there was witnesses that they gave descriptions that matched, an accomplice of his and not him, but because they gave the deal to the friend first, they sentenced him. The other gentleman's already out of jail. There was tons of racism. There were jurors that were quoted after the case that were using racial slurs. So it was a very obvious situation where the Edmond Police Department had just decided that he was going to be the one that was going to take the fall for the crime, and they were taking any and all evidence that they found and tried to shove it into, painting him as the person who did it when all of the evidence pointed, the opposite direction. He had an alibi that they threw out. I mean, it's a really, really sad case of where, justice was very obviously not done for this gentleman. So he is on death row. He's trying to work towards clemency. He's gotten a ton of celebrities and athletes and stuff that are supporting and backing him. But you know how it is sometimes, like there's tons of cases where even government now is saying like, oh yeah, well, we're pretty sure that this person is innocent too. But because of the way that we have our law set up, it's hard for us to find a legal way to, exonerate them or to do different things. So in this case, for example, the way that we have our law set up is typically you're only allowed to file those types of paperwork 21 days prior to you actually being put up for your capital punishment. So in his case, death. But he is not within that window yet. So he's requesting this beforehand. So it's kind of tricky. They're trying to work with him on what legal ways they can perhaps look at doing a new trial or new sentencing, but it's all still in the works. And it's a really, really unfortunate case. But you're right, it does paint a picture of, a lot of the issues that we have in the state of Oklahoma with our criminal justice system. A couple of stats that I like to throw out to people just to show how horrible our system is, for lack of a better way to put it, is we are actually number 1 per capita for incarcerating women in the nation. And we are number 2 in incarceration overall. We sentence our nonviolent offenders about 78% longer. And we have some of the lowest amounts of situations where judges, attorney generals, stuff like that, have had marks put against them or complaints against them formally because of the fact that we have not been allowing certain avenues for people to file such things. So it's really been a really kind of funky situation. Even our jails and prisons. I'm actually going to be at a protest tomorrow at our Oklahoma County jail from 1 to 3 because of the fact that our jail conditions are just so horrible. There's bed bug infestations. There's holes in the walls between cells so people can crawl through them. There's black mold. There's so little amount of staff per inmate ratio that people are not being able to go to their psychiatric appointments or doctor's appointments. It's a real problem overall from the bottom all the way to the top. And so that's one of the reasons why criminal justice reform in general is very high up on my platform, because as anybody knows, criminal justice affects way more than just the inmates in the, prison system. It affects, the families that are left behind to kind of hold everything together. It makes it to where there's less workers out on the streets. It means that there's families that have single incomes. It's kind of like a butterfly effect. And so many of the things that we're struggling with in our state can be fixed if we can take care of the root of the problem, which a lot of times, comes down to this criminal justice issue.
No, and we have a saying here in Rhode Island, in the halls of justice, justice is usually found in the halls. And under our current criminal justice system, is particularly egregious in what's often referred to as the, well, some would call it the minority community, some would call it the BIPOC community. There's different terms for it, but because of racism, because of economic issues and the cost of obtaining a fair justice, it disproportionately affects folks of lower income and particularly the BIPOC community. And again, the impact is, as you point out, is felt through generations. It becomes, it's a tragedy that becomes an ongoing crisis. And we see the symptoms, and to cure the disease, we certainly need to remove politics from criminal justice, and we need to eliminate the quote unquote victimless crimes so that there are resources for people who are accused of these criminal crimes so that they can have the resources for a fair trial. I mean, ultimately it comes down to sometimes just the inability to defend oneself. It's
absolutely. And to kind of caveat on that, that was one of the situations in the Julius Jones case. Even his own attorney had said, you know, this was my first high profile criminal case. He even admitted that he had no idea what he was doing. You know, and it's really unfortunate that we have these individuals who, you know, are already at a disadvantage because economically, you know, they're not going to be able to afford to pay for a fantastic good lawyer. And so we're going to punish them even more by giving them the, you know, the newest, the greenest, you know, attorneys on their behalf as their free counsel, when really it should be the opposite. It should be some of the most knowledgeable, not only because of the fact that we want them to have a fair trial, but we also, for efficiency reasons, should be giving them more experienced attorneys.
So a number of problems here. Obviously, first of all, Oklahoma is a capital punishment state, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Penalty sin. So, you know, as libertarians, there's issues surrounding this, the hovering over this issue like a cancer. You've got capital punishment. I got a sense from what I've been told that you have a pretty egregious system of solitary confinement. And on top of that, you know, what are the status of current drug laws? Do you have medical cannabis? Do you have any form of legalization? Where does that stand?
Yeah, so 3 years ago, we actually did pass medical cannabis here in our state, which was fantastic. That actually that's one of my favorite kind of slogans that I've been using, just to kind of tee off of that a little bit, is because we're in such a red state, people told us, they're like, you're not going to get medical cannabis, you know, this is a very red state. They're very conservative. It's not going to happen. And then of course we all came together and we voted and we made it happen. And so I like to use that as an example when I hear, oh, you know, we can't get a libertarian elected in our state. It's very red. It's not going to happen. And so I said, well, you know what? They said the exact same thing to us when we were trying to pass medical cannabis, and we did it. So guess what? We can. You know, that's just what they want, you know, you to hear so that you can still be under their control. But back on the medical issue, yes, we do have medical cannabis. It's been really interesting because it's almost been the closest thing to kind of a free market system than a lot of other things, because of the fact that we've had the barrier of entry so low. We had a ton of people that came to our state. We have a lot of competition, but it's showing how when you have a whole lot of competition in an area, because the barrier of entry is low, we have some of the best quality products of anywhere around. We have the best cannabis industry out of all the states. And then we also have situations where it's the most cost efficient, because just like with any other free market, you know, whenever you have a whole lot of competition, the pricing is better, you know what's in the product, and you get a better quality product. So I'm really, really proud of how well our cannabis industry has not only handled, you know, bringing a whole new industry into our state, but dealing with all of the changes that have kind of come with that between, you know, OMMA and different entities, you know, in regards to regulation and cracking down on illegal operations. And they've been so cooperative, and they are some of the most well-spoken, fantastic business people I've had the opportunity to meet. And I know that one of the things that we are trying to put on the ballot coming up is the legalization of hallucinogenics, as well as looking at the possibility of trying to get recreational approved, but still protect our medicinal communities by looking at things about like maybe not taxing the medical, but only taxing recreation. So there's lots of fantastic things that are going on in that industry here. And I'm so proud of our healers who have done such a fantastic job with their dispensaries and with their grows.
Yeah, so in so many cases, and this is an issue that I've gotten involved in this year, is the taxation of medical cannabis. And I recently had the opportunity to have a conversation on the record, on video, with our House Finance Chairman here in Rhode Island. And I asked him, at what point do we stop taxing sick people? And I don't know if it was the phrasing, but he looked like he was taken aback. And he goes, I hadn't really thought of it in that manner. And so by taxing medical cannabis, we are effectively taxing medicine for people when no other medicine is taxed. We're not providing any real value to these folks in terms of that taxation. I mean, it's money usually just tossed at the general fund. And, we're talking about something that, because of its legal status, isn't covered by insurance. And so we're taxing folks who very often are suffering from serious potential life-ending diseases and or neuromuscular diseases. And quite frankly, these people are very often broke. I mean, they've literally spent everything they've had trying to save their lives. And to me, and so many states are doing this, it's just outrageous that the government, while at the same time, and I love your reaction to this, very, very often medical cannabis and brew pubs, if you will, the microbrewing industry, are pointed out as successes by the statists, when in fact the statists have done what they could be doing for every industry, because their success of those two industries is rooted firmly in deregulation. Isn't it that ironic at some level?
I know, right? It's crazy how that works. But it is. It's very interesting, and that's why I specifically, was mentioning the trying to set it up in a way for our medical grade dispensaries to either not have to do taxes. Obviously nationally or federally, they've been talking about recently trying to go ahead and end the prohibition on cannabis. In doing so, I really hope that it does make it to where people can have cannabis as part of their, on their prescription cards, or being able to use their HSAs and stuff, to purchase from dispensaries. Right. I would really love an opportunity where people will be able to do that. My husband, he has a medical card. He has chronic back pain from a car accident he got while on the job. And it really has made the difference between him having to use opioids, which, as we know, are so much more damaging and, hard on your body than cannabis is.
Absolutely. Let me ask you an important question then in regards to your campaign. What is the appetite for folks in Oklahoma for criminal justice reform and various shades of legalization, decriminalization of any one of these drugs?
So it's kind of a mix, to be honest with you. So obviously the left-leaning side and the more neutral parties, I guess you could say, are very supportive of that. We do have some pretty conservative Republicans here that are against it, but I don't think that it's something that can't be swayed. I think it's just a lot of it. When someone says decriminalization or legalization, they're thinking, we're going to have a whole bunch of heroin addicts and meth heads running around our state, causing a ruckus. When in all actuality, we're talking about taking the stigma away from things that should not be illegal in the first place. Because, if there is no victim, there is no crime. What someone chooses to do on their own is their own business. But, I try to attack it in a way that equates to dollars being saved in their pockets. For every single inmate that we have in our system, it costs almost $17,000 per year to incarcerate them. And that's just to keep them behind bars. That's not considering, like I mentioned earlier, about you're removing an income from the home. You are taking a potential employee out of the workplace when there's signs up all over the place right now where people are needing their workers to come back. The Medicare, Medicaid, or daycare assistance, all those kinds of things that they may not have needed if they were able to be at home with their families right now, contributing to them financially. And it also, you have to look at, alcoholism versus drug use as well. people are a lot more apt to get help whenever they have alcoholism because of the fact that it's not illegal. They're not worried about saying,
Right.
oh, well, I don't want to say I have a problem with this because it's illegal. Wherein with alcohol, because it's not illegal, it's easier to seek out help. And so I really think that it would enable, a degree of healing. It would save the taxpayers a ton of money, and it would help with so many of the other issues that we have going on right now. So back to the county jail situation, we are so overcrowded in our state that we can't even fix the jails and prisons because we have nowhere to put people, right?
Wow.
And at this point in time, we could release 12,000 inmates and we would still just be on par with everyone else in the nation, which is really kind of crazy to think.
Right. Folks, if you're just joining us, Natalie Bruno is online with us. We had a special visit early on from Whitney Bilyeu. Natalie Bruno is the Libertarian candidate to be the governor of the great state of Oklahoma. And we're talking about criminal justice at length because what we're trying to focus here on the show, again, are issues that matter to Oklahomans and what a libertarian perspective on these issues can accomplish. And in doing so, campaign as a unapologetic, unabashed libertarian who, rather than just engaging in just the general conversations we have about the libertarian philosophy, the movement, the statement of principles, is able to deliver this movement, this philosophy into the homes of Oklahomans surrounding issues that matter to them. And what does that mean? That, number one, it disproves the notion that we don't have ideas, that we don't have solutions to fix, if you will, the ills that both society and largely government have visited upon us. Natalie, again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let's talk about education. We know that's on particularly if we are post-COVID, right? Depending on who you talk to. Post-COVID, Americans everywhere had the opportunity, well, literally, to sit in on their child's education. And the impact of that so far has been staggering because rather than, and most parents, the oppressive cost of living in America now, which is so much a product of the oppressive cost of government, right? Government, if you will, raises the rates of what it costs to do things, and then all of a sudden we have to work harder to support those costs, and then of course that takes it away from our family, and so then government jumps in even more, and it takes over some of the responsibilities of raising our family, and we're involved in this incredibly vicious circle. But all of a sudden we hit this wall with COVID, and parents have to stay home, and they're watching their children being educated remotely, and let's just say a lot of folks were not amused. What is the status of education, particularly K to 12 in Oklahoma? Are there vouchers, mayoral academies, any type of alternatives? And how's it all working out for folks?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the way that we have things set up right now in our state is we do have somewhat of a parent choice. So we have our public schools, and then we have a combination of charter schools and private schools. Obviously, our homeschooling is we're a very homeschool friendly state, so it's very easy for parents to be able to homeschool their children. And then we also have programs like EPIC, which basically it allows students to have their public education dollars moved to a remote learning experience.
Excellent.
And so with the state of Oklahoma, as I'm sure in other states, I actually really loved the effect that COVID had on the parents. And the reason I say that is because I just want to preface by saying I have 6 children. Like I mentioned, I have 2 stepsons and then 4 children of my own. And we have 2 that did public school, 2 that I pulled and did homeschool last year, and then I have 2 in private school. So I do have a very mixed viewpoint on this because I do feel like every single child and every single family is completely different and therefore needs to be able to have options that fit their dynamic. But I loved the way that with the parents being home, seeing the education firsthand, being more involved in the education, I think that it really gave more power to the parents to realize, I do want to be more involved with my child's education. I do care whether or not they're in school and private school. And there was a lot of parents that did say, hey, we're paying these tax dollars in. I should have more of a right to say where my tax dollars go when it comes to my children. If I want to take my child and put them in private school, I should be able to take some of those funds that go towards my individual child and take that with me. Or if I want to send my child to a charter school, or I want to do remote or homeschooling, and parents should have that option, because the whole goal of putting together a Department of Education was to try to help benefit the education of our children, right? But as we've seen, that has not been the case. The more government has been involved in our education, the quality has continued to decline. And more of our, dollars that we are sending in for education are actually filtering and coming back to our kids. And so it's really now made education more of a priority, not only just in, teacher pay, which has always been kind of an issue here, but also the quality of education, the options. I know on my specific platform, I'm also speaking about the graduation requirements. There should not be the types of graduation requirements that we have, and parents are seeing that too. They should be more specialty based. They should be more fluid to accommodate the career track of the individual child, and not what, not what we want to put forward so we can get federal grant dollars, right? So it's definitely a parent choice situation. But there has been some turmoil there, but I am very supportive of parent choice. And I've been very vocal about that.
One of the areas that Oklahoma has been among states that lead the nation. A lot of this, by the way, originated in Arizona, nearby Arizona, under the auspice and the promotion of an organization called the Goldwater Institute. And it's something called the Oklahoma Equal Opportunity Education Scholarships, where folks who donate to a fund receive a significant tax credit. I believe it's 50%. And that fund then is available to a variety of students to support their move into private education. So you've got this dual approach in multiple states, particularly in the Southwest and the Southeast. Let's just say it hasn't been embraced by the union-obsessed school systems in the Northeast. Shocker. But right. where there is a real money available in a manner, as you mentioned earlier, not unlike an HSA card, where people can take the do-re-mi with them. It travels. And here isn't this the ultimate goal, to have the money travel with the student? In our initial stages, a friend of mine refers to public school often as theft school. A provocative term, to say the least. But,
right. But I will say, when it comes to that private school money, so my daughter's actually, there is a grant here called the Lindsay Nicole Henry Grant. And what it does is it's similar to what you're talking about. It comes out of that fund, and it allows children who have an IEP. So in this case, my daughters both have autism. They're very high functioning. And so being in a traditional school was not most beneficial to them. So it enabled me to have more funds that followed them to a private school. So that way they could have a smaller class setting. Right. They could have more one-on-one attention. The school that we chose was Bishop McGinnis Catholic High School. They have a REACH program there, which, specializes in giving extra help to children like my daughters. And it's been a saving grace. I mean, they would not be doing as well as they are right now if they were forced to be in the public school system. And the fact that it has enabled them to have a private education, has been phenomenal, and has given them the opportunity to where one of my daughters is actually on the National Honor Society. And that would not have happened if she was in public school.
Right. And so, as we've all sort of grown up in the year 2021, we understand that people learn differently, and people's educational goals should not be tunneled or funneled, if you will, into these very wide norms. And, clearly college isn't for everyone. So why do we obsess as a state, as a nation, with putting children on a track to college when, in fact, I believe all children have superpowers. So why not, if we're going to use government-sponsored education, at least for now, why not dedicate those funds in a manner which the parents, who ultimately are responsible for the children's growth, educationally, socially, morally, why not have the parents dictate that direction?
Oh, absolutely. Especially when you look at the fact that when you do surveys or read surveys about, why children drop out of school and situations like that, when you remove cases where there's a financial burden, like maybe they're having to go to work to help with the family, situations like that, a lot of times it's because they've gotten in situations where they're forced to take classes that don't resonate with them, they perform badly in, but we force them to take the classes because you have to have,
Right.
These 4 math classes, you have to have these 4 science classes, so on and so forth. When I really feel like that is a kind of a detriment to the child. I mean, when I look at my children or even look at myself, I had done so well in my classes. I got done with math early that I was going to have to take calculus just to make sure I had my 4 maths. But I'm like, I'm not going into a math and science field. I'm going into marketing and advertising. Why do I need to take, and it's really unfortunate that we're not building the education to really highlight what the children are good at and what their goals are and what, what interests them, to help push them down a path that, isn't necessarily even maybe college. We have welding, plumbing, we have all of these trades that are very well needed and pay well. And for whatever reason, we, brainwash people to think that if they don't have a college degree, then they're not as educated or, not as worthy. And that's absolutely not the case. Nowadays, unless you're going into like a medical field, teaching something like that, arguably, even the need of degrees themselves are kind of going away. And I think that we're seeing that, just looking at the enrollment of higher education.
Now, there's an area which some would say this is uniquely Oklahoman, this what I'm about to raise. I would argue it's probably not as uniquely Oklahoman as you might think. And of course, I'm talking about McGirt versus Oklahoma.
Yes.
Talk to us. I doubt many of our listeners have ever heard of McGirt versus Oklahoma. Yet at the same time, this is, I live in Rhode Island. It wasn't called Narragansett Bay because of some consulting agency thought about. There's an organization called the Narragansett Indians, who, we have rather tenuous relationships with. What happened in McGirt versus Oklahoma, and why is it so important?
Yes. So, again, I'm going to say this is a situation where I'm going to give like a 5-minute high-level overview. If you want more details, for anybody that's watching, I actually did about a 20-minute, 25-minute video about this a couple weeks ago that you can find on my Facebook page. But essentially what McGirt versus Oklahoma is there was a situation where there was a Native American who had committed a crime on what he believed was Native land, but was tried in Oklahoma courts. So the way that we have things set up is if a Native American commits a crime on tribal land, or if a crime was done to a Native American on tribal land, it either has to be handled through the tribal judicial system or it has to go to federal court. It cannot be tried in the state courts. But in this particular case, he was tried in the state courts. Mm-hmm. So essentially what happened is they brought it up to the Supreme Court and said, hey, he should have never been tried in state court. Well, they tried to claim that, well, no, this is not, Creek Reservation anymore. They were arguing that it was because it was the land that was given in the treaties and it was never actually dissolved. So it became a very big deal, not because of the fact of whether or not he was guilty, because it was honestly a very cut and dry case where the gentleman was very guilty, but it brought up the fact of, okay, so are these lands still considered reservations or not?
Wow.
And so we, so they looked at it and said, yes, this land still belongs to the Native Americans, even though Governor Stitt and the state did try to fight it and tried to say, oh, well, but because of the allotment period and stuff like that, that dissolved the reservations. And they're like, no, it didn't. Congress made the treaties. We're the only ones that have the ability to say whether or not the reservation was dissolved. And we never did. That verbiage was never used. Yes, it became, instead of a communal property, they did take it to where the individual natives owned pieces of the land because they were trying to teach them to be more white or more Midwestern and have individual property. but the entity in the region as a whole is still considered reservation land. And so it's brought up all kinds of different issues about, mineral rights. And now we have 7,500 cases that could be retried because of the fact that of this ruling. And the state's argument also, specifically Governor Stitt, was, well, but this whole time, we haven't been utilizing this. And so it should go off of the way that we have been. And it was funny because, the Supreme Court essentially said, well, that's nice that you just admitted to the fact that you haven't been abiding by the MCA this whole time, but that just means that you were doing it wrong. That was not the way that it was supposed to be. And so the federal government has put aside a lot of money. They've hired a lot of agents here in the state to help with the workload. But it is a case that Governor Stitt is still trying to fight and have overturned, which is kind of ridiculous. And I think a slap in the Native Americans' face, because it was a very cut and dry case. It was very obvious that the ruling was done correctly based off of, all of the wording of the treaties. And, the other thing as well is that, the Native American tribes here, help our state tremendously. And I'm not even talking about gaming in either. I specifically have worked for the Chickasaw Nation, the Choctaws, and the citizens of the Potawatomi Nations here. And for as much money as they donate, for as much money as they giving taxes to our state, they give just as much to the communities in which they operate. And I'm talking about, employing thousands and thousands of tribal and non-tribal Oklahomans across our states. They help fund schools. They buy technology. They have tons of scholarships. There's so many things that they do. And the fact that Stitt is continuing to waste taxpayer dollars fighting this, instead of, understanding the fact that he lost another Supreme Court case and he's just going to have to move on and take this time to actually get together with the tribes, sit with them and come up with a solution, is really unfortunate that it's working this way. And if I were governor, that is definitely not the way that I would have been handling it. I would have, A, never fought it in the first place, but B, I would be taking this time to help work with the tribes, because the fact of we have these 7,500 cases now that we need to worry about, and we need to not worry about wasting taxpayer money fighting the Supreme Court ruling.
Right. And it's interesting because the Supreme Court ruling, the writing for the majority, was that wild-eyed liberal Neil Gorsuch, which is to say, if you're getting a Gorsuch writing for the majority, you need to just, go home. Let's talk about the election itself in the remaining moments that we have. As is so often the case when we talk about individual states, each state has got its own approach literally to everything. In terms of running for office, have you given thought yet to what your win number needs to be? And then, of course, I've got to ask you about it being obsessed with the media the way I am. How does one approach a state like Oklahoma, which is so vast? I think Oklahoma City is probably bigger than Rhode Island. So vast. And is it a complicated media picture out there? Do you have a lot of media markets that you have to contend with? Okay,
so there's a whole lot of questions there, so I'm going to kind of try to address all of them. So when it comes to how the election process is going to kind of work. So we don't have ballot access issues. Thanks to Todd Hagopian and other predecessors, they have done a fantastic job of running statewide races and making sure to continue to keep that ballot access for us. So luckily, that is not an issue that we have here. We are in a very red state, but it's only 50% registered Republican. We have about 16% independent, 30-something% Democrat, and then the rest are Libertarians. As of right now, I would say that, and I hope this doesn't come off cocky in any way, shape, or form, but one of the things that I have that benefit me is the fact that I may not be the most well-known libertarian, but a lot of people know who I am because of the work that I've done across our state from a philanthropy standpoint. I'm on associate boards for nonprofits. I work with lots of different nonprofit agencies from a volunteering aspect. I coach soccer and basketball. for multiple entities as well. So a lot of people know who I am, in that regard. And then even from, a media area, so we have Tulsa and Oklahoma City. Those are our two major markets. But thankfully, because of the fact that I am in marketing and advertising, I have worked for the Oklahoman. I work alongside our broadcast companies and our media companies. And so these are people who already know who I am. They know I'm a serious candidate. They know I'm not some third-party candidate that is just crazy and trying to get on the ballot like a Joe Exotic. Hating to use that name exactly, but they know who I am. And a lot of times when the media has not allowed for third parties in the past, it's because they have not taken them seriously. And so they did not want to have a risk of, any issues pop up from that. But because they know who I am and I am not a stranger to the communities, I think that I am not going to have as much of an issue being included in media as, my predecessors have. I'm already seeing lots of articles mention my name. I've had a couple of interviews, especially, the last time I did the protest at the jail, I was interviewed by Channel 4 here. So I am getting some coverage, even this early in the race. And I do expect to be able to continue to have coverage as well. Of course, I'm not going to be able to get as much coverage as probably the R's and the D's until they see how high I'm polling. But I do feel like I will not have as much of an issue as previous libertarians have.
Excellent. No, that's it. Again, you've hit on a handful of our prevailing themes, if you will, for this effort right there. Early start, aggressive interaction with the media, presenting yourself in public appearances that are media attendant, media worthy, that are a direct reflection of some of the key principles of the libertarian philosophy and movement, and quite frankly, the platform. All of that just blends together so neatly. It's just wonderful.
Another thing too, you asked one more question, Pat, that I just remembered I didn't answer. You were discussing a win number. So I even have a complete campaign plan marked out as of right now that I've sent off to lots of people that I have kind of pulled together, like Spike Cohen and Steve Dossbach and stuff to review. So I do have a win number. I have a complete volunteer plan. I have a fantastic campaign team. And I'm really fortunate that I also have a fantastic state LP. And I really think that's going to be part of the secret sauce that's going to get me elected, is that it's really hard to have a strong candidate when you also don't have a very strong affiliate program going on in your state. And so the fact that we have just been killing it from an Oklahoma LP standpoint, it makes my job as a candidate so much easier.
And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, of course, you mentioned Todd Hagopian, a great activist. Aaron Adams, of course, the legend, is he's
fantastic. She's so amazing. And Chris Powell, we have some powerhouse people here in Oklahoma.
No, it is the right time. It is the right place. And it's clear you're the right candidate. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up one other issue, and it's funny how the cultural timing is. There is a movie that's being introduced to us right now, Stillwater, which I guess is going to be, and I take this remark from the Oklahoman itself, that this is a sort of a deep dive into Oklahoma culture. Have you seen it yet? And Oklahoma has become sort of this national source of attention at a number of media levels. Any thoughts on it yet?
So I don't think it's actually come out yet. I'll have to Google that. I think it's coming out soon, but it's the one with Matt Damon. Right. It was actually kind of neat. We have some of our libertarian members that have been able to have their towns used as a lot of the different parts of the filming, which is kind of cool. We have a lot of movies being filmed here right now, but I have seen bits and pieces of it that they have shared with us as a state. And from what I've seen, it's pretty darn accurate. And so I'm really excited to see the whole movie, but I have not yet. I don't know why, but I was thinking it might be in the next week or something that it comes out, or it could just be that I'm so busy that I haven't seen the fact that it has finally made movie screens. But I am excited to see it, and I'm a big Matt Damon fan anyway. So
Excellent, excellent. Well, this is the part of the show that we love the most. We call it shameless self-promotion. If you could tell folks, just first off, how they can donate, where they can go to become volunteers. Give us just sort of the layout of your social media, your website, and how folks can follow what I think is going to be a pretty provocative Natalie Bruno story.
Yes. So my website, everything is kind of ran through there. So it's electnataliebruno.com, as you can see. It has my social media handles in there. I have a newsletter that I send out quasi-regularly. I'm trying not to, annoy people too much this early in the campaign. There's also a donate button on my page. So one initiative that I'm doing right now is I had noticed that I was getting so much support not only in Oklahoma, but outside of our state as well from other libertarians. And so I have this goal where I am trying to get at least one donation from all 50 states. I have an interactive map that I've actually been sharing on Facebook and Twitter. And we've been highlighting each state gold as they have received a donation. It's been really fun seeing the different affiliates sharing it and calling out on their people to donate to the campaign. So please take a look. If your state is not represented, please jump on there and donate, even if it's $5, $10, $15. But as all of us know, one of the big things that we as libertarians, one of the big issues we have is that we don't have all the PACs and super PACs and stuff like that the other two parties have. And so we really rely on fundraising, not only within our state, but our friends in our other states as well. What you need to realize is that even though I'm not in your state, a win for Oklahoma and me winning this governor's race is a win for libertarians everywhere. Absolutely. And it helps other states see how serious we are, that we're putting forth winning candidates, big candidates. We're not just winning small offices. And then it helps every other candidate in other state as well. So please consider donating to my campaign. We are running a very efficient, a very serious campaign here. And I am really excited about the fact that I'm really hoping to be the first libertarian governor of Oklahoma.
Well, so many folks who may not agree with our principles and don't understand our philosophy like to point out that, you don't have governors doing it. And of course, then we return fire by pointing out how big a failure so many governors are. Rather than attack our philosophy and our belief system, which would be a losing venture very quickly, they obsess over our lack of experienced, not just candidates, but winning candidates. That's changing literally every month. We're not even waiting for between special elections, appointments. There's a sea change happening in America. And yeah, that sounds dramatic, right? I'd be using the term sea change. When again, we're very often as a party focused inward on some of our own internal challenges. No, it's true. Candidates continue to win. Candidates continue to place well. Candidates from the Libertarian Party are an exigent threat to the duopoly, to the status quo, as I like to call it. And they are responding by ad hominem attacks, changing the rules in the electoral system, when in fact you never see them really addressing the core of our philosophy and our belief system and our approach, again, not to governing, but to stewardship. And that's really all you need to know, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Listen, Natalie, thank you. First of all, congratulations. This was a how-to, in a sense, particularly for such an early campaign. Your command of the issues is outstanding. And we are a solutions-based philosophy. And so the ability to take our philosophy and then project it onto existing issues within states, within communities, within localities, suburb, whatever, is the key to our success. And of course, that sounds so simplistic. Yet in reality, it's a challenge every day because there are so many issues to contend with. And big government is such an oppressive force to solving those challenges. So when someone comes to the table and is able to discuss big picture issues with specifics, people are often stunned by that, and it's a wake-up call. And your candidacy is the epitome of that. And so nothing but the best. I know we'll have you on again before the election. Folks need to see these candidacies occurring not in a vacuum, but as symbolic of the effort that's taking place in grassroots America across the nation. And I look forward to hearing about tomorrow's events. Prison reform, criminal justice reform is one of the most urgent challenges in our nation and presents libertarians with the opportunity that you're clearly taking advantage of to key in on one of our strengths. We are the party of criminal justice reform. We are the party of fighting the type of institutional racism that contributes to the collapse ethically and philosophically and factually across what I dare not even call a criminal justice system. So nothing but the best. Folks need to contribute and support your efforts from around the nation, and let's stay in touch. And quite frankly, we predict great things for you. So thank you very, very much for taking time out and joining us and sharing your success story. It's already a success story with libertarians around the nation.
Thank you so much, Pat. I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to being on again.
Excellent. Folks, again, Natalie Bruno, she's a candidate for governor of the great state of Oklahoma, the Sooner State, all that good stuff. But it's real, and it's happening. So let's take that energy, that how we're conflicted by events, and let's generate it towards the Natalie Brunos of the Libertarian Party. Folks, you've been listening to Candidates Corner on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, a production of Libertarian Party and Libertarian National Committee. Whitney Bilyeu, who joins us tonight, serving as chair. As always, a big thanks to John Gapso on the big board. He's the guy who brings up all the graphics and the fun maps and the articles and the websites. My name is Pat Ford. As always, it is a singular honor to have conversations with libertarian candidates from around the nation. It's time to get to work. Let's do it. We'll see you next week on Candidates Corner. Have a wonderful weekend.